It's Wednesday, May 28th, 2025. The Trump-Harvard war rolls on. Is Doge dead? And why Democrats don't have a messaging problem at all. Next on the AM Update.
We're now one step closer to realizing President Trump's promise to make America healthy again.
And today, I will announce that I will be the future governor of the great state of Alabama.
Past Memorial Day, and not 1 cent in Doge cuts have been implemented by the Congress.
Our sacred rule of law is under attack.
I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and the Shinabeg people.
I'll admit this is a saga that I have not paid probably enough attention to. The Trump administration is moving to cut all remaining federal contracts with Harvard University. The General Services Administration sent a letter to federal agencies this week advising them to end any contracts with the Ivy League school. This is the latest move by the administration to punish the school for repeatedly allowing anti-Semitism to persist on campus and allegedly continuing to use race-based policies. The letter from the General Services Administration claims the school has a, quote, lack of commitment to non-discrimination and a deeply troubling pattern of allowing student-on-student violence in the wake of Hamas's October 7th, 2023 attack on Israel and the rise of anti-Semitic protests on campus. The GSA is requiring agencies to report their plans of terminating relations with Harvard by June 6th. In other news, it's official. The CDC is no longer recommending the COVID jab for pregnant women and healthy children. Here is RFK Jr., HHS Secretary, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya of NIH, and FDA Commissioner Marty Makary.
I couldn't be more pleased to announce that as of today, the COVID vaccine for healthy children and healthy pregnant women has been removed from the CDC recommended immunization schedule. Last year, the Biden administration urged healthy children to get yet another COVID shot despite the lack of any clinical data to support the repeat booster strategy in children.
That ends today. It's common sense and it's good science.
There's no evidence healthy kids need it today, and most countries have stopped recommending it for children.
We're now one step closer to realizing President Trump's promise to make America healthy again.
This is undeniably a good move and a good piece of news from HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., flanked by Marty Makary and Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. This is just the first step in the right direction, but it's an incredibly important first step. Make America Healthy Again has been embroiled now in kind of a couple of months of a lot of sniping back and forth, infighting, things of that nature. And so it's hopefully, for the time being, a move like this, a step in the right direction of actually pulling these shots, these still experimental shots off of the market. I do believe we are in the process. We are watching them move in that direction. This should bring the temperature in the room down just a little bit. Now, President Trump indicated last week that Russia and Ukraine would immediately begin negotiation talks. Trump appeared optimistic then, noting that his 2-hour call on May 19th with Vladimir Putin of Russia went very well, even though the Russian president would not immediately agree to an unconditional ceasefire with Ukraine. While the road to peace still appeared rocky and uncertain, Trump indicated days later there were signs of promise as Russia and Ukraine had started their largest prisoner of war swap. Well, since that's happened, Russia has pelted Ukraine, as we talked about yesterday morning, with oodles of drone and missile strikes, while Russian forces continue to advance in the east of the beleaguered country. On the evening of May 24th, Russia fired 14 ballistic missiles into Ukraine, 6 of which were apparently shot down, according to the Ukrainian Air Force. Again, I'm taking all of this with a grain of salt. Russia also dispatched 355 drones, 128 of which were also reportedly shot down. Well, we played that soundbite yesterday of President Trump talking about how he does not like what he's seeing from Vladimir Putin. Well, that war of words escalated yesterday with President Trump writing on Truth Social, quote, "What Vladimir Putin doesn't realize is that if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have already happened to Russia, and I mean really bad. He's playing with fire." Russian state media also then reported that Vladimir Putin thinks that Trump is being emotional. This is just a crazy development, especially considering, as we just talked about, it seemed like Trump was very optimistic just about a week ago. Seems like that optimism has been thrown into shambles. As the seeming breakdown in communication between the United States and Russia seems to be going on, here's German Chancellor Friedrich Merz on the possibility of sending Ukraine some longer-range weapons. He says there are no longer any range restrictions on weapons supplied to Ukraine, not from the British, not from the French, not from us, not from the Americans either. This means Ukraine can now defend itself by attacking military positions in Russia, for example. It couldn't do that until some time ago, and with very few exceptions, it didn't do that until some time ago. Now it can. In jargon, we call this long-range fire, i.e. equipping Ukraine with weapons that attack military targets in the rear. So, I think you've heard enough there. It seems like they're taking the training wheels off of Ukraine and their forces and allowing them to use long-range weapons. It seemed like, at least from the American perspective, just 1 or 2 weeks ago, there was some optimism that there would be a true ceasefire and maybe a pathway to lasting peace. Now it seems like anything could happen. Even an escalation in this war, even from Ukraine's perspective, could happen. This is just a pit, just circling the drain. This entire story. All I know is that I think President Trump is right. There's too much killing. For what purpose? We don't know. No one knows. There's just too much bloodshed and life lost. Justices Alito and Thomas dissented from the Supreme Court's decision Tuesday to reject an appeal in a free speech case where a middle school student was barred from wearing a T-shirt that says, quote, "There are only two genders." In June of 2024, the First Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of Nichols Middle School in Middleborough, Massachusetts, based on the precedent of Tinker v. Des Moines Independent School District, according to the court's ruling. The 1969 case concerning students who wore black armbands in protest of the Vietnam War held that students have freedom of speech at school as long as it doesn't materially interrupt or disrupt classwork or involve substantial disorder. Alito wrote in his dissent that the First Court cherry-picked which First Amendment principles it thought worthy of allowing through the schoolhouse gates. He said, quote, "We should reaffirm the bedrock principle that a school may not engage in viewpoint discrimination when it regulates student speech." Thomas concurred with Alito's dissent, but noted that Tinker is binding precedent that lower courts must faithfully apply. He said in his opinion, quote, "In holding otherwise, the First Circuit distorted this court's First Amendment case law in significant ways that warrant this court's review." According to the dissent, 7th grade student Liam Morrison was called in by the principal during his first period gym class, where he was told that other students found his shirt offensive. The principal told Morrison to change his shirt and sent him home after he refused. Morrison's father pointed out in an email to the superintendent that students, quote, "made political statements through their choice of clothes, pins, posters, and speech." However, the superintendent reportedly stated Morrison's shirt violated the school's dress code by, quote, "targeting students of a protected class, namely in the area of gender identity." Morrison decided to wear a shirt to school that said there are censored genders. He was sent to the principal's office again, where he agreed to change his shirt rather than go home. So obvious discrimination, obvious viewpoint discrimination from that school against that poor young man. Obvious, egregious examples of violating the First Amendment. And yet the Supreme Court can't be bothered to take up that case. Can't make this stuff up. We go now to Alabama, where Senator Tommy Tuberville made this announcement yesterday.
And today, I will announce that I will be the future governor of the great state of Alabama.
There we go.
Now, I've still got 18 months to go with President Trump to make America great again. We got a lot of work to do. Monday we'll go back and pass the big, beautiful bill for President Trump. But I'm doing this to help this country and the great state of Alabama.
That is Tommy Tuberville, former college football coach turned U.S. Senator. Now he's running for Kay Ivey's position as governor of Alabama. Don't really have any huge optimism when it comes to Tommy Tuberville. Hopefully he's surrounded with some good people. Maybe if you live in Alabama, you can tell me what you think about your senator, because I haven't heard very many good things. When we come back, another governor, this would be Ron DeSantis of the state of Florida, slammed congressional Republicans for failing to implement any of the Doge cuts and make them permanent law. We also hear the singularity of journalistic id and ego from Scott Pelley, and why Democrats have a matrix problem, not a messaging problem. That's coming up next.
I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and the Anishinaabe people. This land acknowledgement is a recognition of shared history as a nation, while continuing to deepen my own understanding. It is my great hope that in each of your communities and collectively as a country, a path is found toward truth and reconciliation.
King Charles begins his address to the Canadian Parliament with a land acknowledgement to the Algonquin people. That would be the king. A land acknowledgement. Yes, woke has even made the king of Britain, bend the knee. Meanwhile, in South Africa, here's President Ramaphosa on that Kill the Boer chant and song, and says, oh, it's not all it's cracked up to be.
For us. And when it comes to the issues of arresting anyone for any slogan, that is a sovereign issue. It's not a matter where we need to be instructed by anyone that go and arrest this one. We are a very proud sovereign country that has its own laws, that has its own processes, and we take into account what the Constitutional Court also decided when it said that, that slogan, kill the Boer, kill the farmer, is a liberation chant and slogan. And it's not meant to be a message that elicits or calls upon anyone to go and be killed. And that is what our court decided. So they will probably want to arrest people willy-nilly. We follow the dictates of our Constitution because we are a constitutional state and we are a country where freedom of expression is the bedrock of our constitutional.
Oh, bless his heart. That is South African President Ramaphosa saying that the chants in that song, kill the Boer, shoot the farmer, is just an expression of liberation and, quote, not meant to be a message that elicits or calls upon anyone to be killed, even though it's a message that elicits and calls upon anyone to be killed. Back at home, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis discussed financial literacy and sanity, which his state enjoys in large part thanks to his strong leadership. Actually, let's not even say that. It's only because of his strong leadership that they enjoy fiscal sanity and constant surpluses. Well, he took it to congressional Republicans yesterday in a speech, talking about their lack of willingness or really lack of ability to do anything to implement the Doge cuts. What do you think about this?
I'm arguing for lowering spending, but just understand that $2 trillion deficit is a tax on you. It works its way through the economy. There's no free lunch, and that's what ends up happening. And it's a little frustrating. Elon Musk went into this Doge effort. He was getting lampooned. I mean, like they're firebombing his Tesla dealerships. Media smearing him relentlessly. His businesses suffered, all this stuff, because he basically said, look, we can't keep doing this, and we need to moderate and reduce the amount of money that the federal government is spending. And yet, we have a Republican Congress, and to this day, we're in the end of May, past Memorial Day, and not 1 cent in Doge cuts have been implemented by the Congress. That's one of the reasons why we need a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It's another reason why we need term limits for members of Congress. But I think what you've seen with how, and I kind of said this early on, that Doge and Elon were on a collision course with the swamp. And the question is, what would happen? And I don't think there's any question that Doge fought the swamp. And so far, the swamp has won. And that's just unfortunate, but I don't think you can look at this any other way. So
what do you think about that? I think depending on your perspective, Doge has kind of done its job, or Doge never really had a start, never really had a chance. That's the topic of this week's poll of the week. I asked you, is Doge dead? I gave you 3 options and, of course, the ability to say anything you would like. Because I think Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is correct. Based on everything we've seen from Elon Musk over the past couple of weeks or so, it seems like he's waving the white flag in terms of any political solutions to the national debt problem and trying to fix government and streamline government. Make it more efficiency, like Doge, like it says in the name there. It seems like he recognizes that Congress is absolutely worthless. That's the poll of the week. Go find it pinned at the top of @RealAmUpdate on X. Scott Pelley of CBS News gave the commencement address at Wake Forest University. This is 100%, 200 proof, straight up journalistic ego and id, just an outsized view of oneself.
But in this morning, our sacred rule of law is under attack. Journalism is under attack. Universities are under attack.
Oh, this is good
Freedom
stuff.
of speech is under attack. And insidious fear is reaching through our schools, our businesses, our homes, and into our private thoughts.
That's supposed to be a journalist. But of course, like most journalists, it's just blue anon activism. Now, some of that stuff I really like to hear. Our universities are under attack. Good. When he talks about freedom of speech, we just had a middle schooler who couldn't get the Supreme Court to say, no, you can wear whatever shirt that you want to. It just states biological truth. So, freedom of speech under attack. I mean, we're going to be talking about this in just a little bit. We just found out the Biden administration labeled those who oppose mask and jab mandates as domestic violent extremists. But yeah, sure. Go on, Scott Pelley. Just never-ending fountains of ego. Speaking of that aforementioned case about domestic violent extremists and how the Biden administration labeled those who opposed mask and jab mandates, here is Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard on the Will Cain Show discussing what she has done, the work that she has done to declassify those documents, and tells more of the story about what the Biden administration was up to.
When you look at the language of these documents that I've declassified, first, the strategic implementation plan of the Biden administration's designation of potential violent domestic extremists, it really talks about people who may likely turn out to be domestic violent extremists, or those who may likely turn to violence because of these specific quote-unquote ideologies that they hold. And there's a consistent thread through here that these ideologies that they are designating as turning into potentially violent activities or being manifested in violent activities happen to be those of people who were using their First Amendment rights to oppose certain policies of the Biden administration. And while some of the examples that are focused on there have to do with those who opposed the COVID vaccine mandates, those who opposed the mask mandates, parents who were concerned that their children going to school may be forcibly vaccinated with the COVID vaccine without the consent or awareness of parents. The list goes on, but it's not exclusive to this. In some of these reports that we've declassified, it shows that people who were opposed to Biden's border policy, for example, could therefore have propensities to join a militia or could become these domestic violent extremists that we're talking about here. And again, it's important to look at this in the totality and the sequence of how this happened. These documents were issued in December of 2021. You remember very well, Will, the speech, the ominous speech that President Biden gave in 2022, where there with this red background and Marines standing in the background, he issued an address to the nation warning the American people that Donald J. Trump and MAGA Republicans pose a direct threat to the fabric of our republic. And then you put that together with how the FBI and others within the Biden administration directed social media companies to censor Americans and undermine our First Amendment rights because, of course, the social media companies don't want to be in a position to support the spread of domestic violent extremism. So when you look at all of these things together, you understand at its core the thing that I committed to the American people to root out, which is the weaponization and politicization of the intelligence community and national security state against the American people.
This is just the latest example from Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard of just how night and day it feels like. I mean, it was only, 5.5, 6 months ago, really just about 5 months ago, Joe Biden was still in office. It feels like a completely different country since that time. And that's a good thing. But we also cannot forget the evil that they tried to pull. The evil that they tried to do to us. They labeled people likely like you and me domestic violent extremists. A precursor to being able to sic the FBI on us just for simply opposing mask and jab mandates. That's wicked. It must be punished. And I pray the Trump Department of Justice takes action and steps to do so. When we come back, the Democrats do not have a messaging problem. They have a matrix problem. It's coming up next. And finally, air analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. New York Times wrote about Democrats' plans to reach white young men, or just young men in general. They called it SAM, Speaking to American Men. Promises this program, they've invested $20 million into this program, promises to study the language, the syntax of young men, see what makes things go viral in their world, and suggests buying advertisements in places like video games and sporting events and elsewhere. There's also a memo attached with this $20 million plan to study this strange creature called the young man, in which it states that they have to drop the tone of moralizing. And then there's this. This is Joel Payne. He's a Democratic strategist. Here's what he said on MSNBC just a little bit ago, a couple of days ago, regarding what the Democrats need to do, kind of reacting to that story.
I'll say, we're really talking about young men, right? Young men who Democrats have not figured out a consistent pitch for how to get in front of. And I think it starts with authenticity.
So there is Joel Payne. He was panning some of these efforts amongst Democrats to try to understand demos that they're not doing well with. And then says at the end there, well, we just need to be authentic. We need to be who we are. You don't have a messaging problem. You don't even have an authenticity problem. And that's the problem. The fact that you don't have a messaging problem and the fact that you are authentic, except during election season when you just straight up lie about who you are, that is the problem in and of itself. You have no problem whatsoever telling the American people, and especially young men, that they are trash. You need to do land acknowledgments whenever you can. You're inherently less than based on the color of your skin, if you have white skin. You're a bigot, homophobe, transphobe, if you think that men shouldn't be competing against females in female athletics. They are very, very good at being authentic because that's their authentic selves. So they don't have a messaging problem. They don't have an authenticity problem. They tell you exactly who they are in no uncertain terms. If you pray for women outside of baby killing facilities, we will put you in prison. Even if you're a Holocaust surviving grandma. They're telling you exactly who they are. Messaging very well. The problem for them is that they've been too honest. See, what they're talking about when they say we need to be authentic. We need to connect and we need to learn the syntax of young men. We need to message better. And yeah, I've joked about that before. Their messaging consultant is basically Buster Bluth, if you're familiar with Arrested Development. And he goes on that just expletive-filled tirade because whoever is their messaging consultant over there apparently at the start of the year told them, a bunch of their Democrat men, to grow beards and to use a lot of colorful language as much as possible. So I joke about that, but no, they don't have a messaging issue. What they mean when they say that, we are struggling to figure out new lies to tell the American people about what we really believe. We're running out of lies. That's what they're really saying. Because they have been extremely honest and extremely effective in communicating just who they are, what they believe, and what they intend to do with those who get in their way. That's their real problem. If they admit that problem, though, they will have admitted they lost an argument. And the communist will never admit that he's lost an argument. So they don't have a messaging problem. They have a matrix problem, the matrix that they created. Now, the irony in all of this is, if Republicans don't govern well, these people could and will win again. Happy Wednesday. That's going to do it. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.